Hello, and thank you for joining us today for this very important conversation about suicide. It's a sad fact that suicide is the biggest killer of anyone under the age of 35 in the UK. And yet many of us know little or nothing about it, despite the fact that we've probably been touched by it at some stage. We do hope that today's discussion will give you insight and encourage you to open up the conversation in the workplace, amongst your families and your peer groups. Two people who have lost a much loved young person are kindly joining us today to share their experiences and learning and help us understand the issue better. Mike Palmer is a firefighter from Manchester who lost his 17-year-old daughter Beth just before the lockdown. Mike is one of the 3 dads walking who are walking across the UK this month to raise awareness about suicide. Nicola Abraham lost her son Jacob in 2015. He was 24. Nicola, who's based in Wales, set up the foundation in Jacob's name to provide counselling for young people who are experiencing suicidal thoughts, as well as intervention training and support for families who've been affected. Nicola will be joining us shortly. And our third guest is Gary Edwards, who is a suicide prevention advisor for the charity PAPYRUS, which is dedicated to the prevention of suicide and the promotion of positive health among young people. And Gary will be explaining the work that they do and the help and support that is available. Now, this is a conversation that we hope will be very helpful to every one of you who's tuned in today. If you have any questions for Mike, Nicola and Gary during the conversation, please put them in the chat and we'll do our best to answer them. And we're recording the conversation, so we'll share that with you afterwards. And please do share that with any friends, family, work colleagues that you have that you think it might be helpful for. So thank you both for joining us. And I know Nicola is trying to get in at the moment. As usual, there's the odd technical issue as we do these live streams, so do please bear with us on that. And we do very much hope that Nicola will join us shortly. Mike, perhaps we could start with you and you could just tell us really what happened and what happened with Beth.
Beth took her own life on the 28th of March 2020 in the first week of lockdown. What happened to Beth, why she took her own life, I don't think we'll ever properly know. She was there one minute and gone the next. A happy, talented, loving young girl, full of life, everything to live for, and somehow she fell into despair. It's very difficult, but looking back now, I think I missed signs of her despair. She was falling into maybe poor mental health. And really, because I had no experience of it, I didn't read the signs. And she was basically there one minute and gone the next.
That's just an appalling thing to have to go through. And that awful thing that you've just said there really is that not having any answers to it. You can't ask the question, because it's just impossible, isn't it? So how did it impact yourself, your family? You've got you've got other children, haven't you?
Yes, I've got other children. The effects of losing someone to suicide, losing a daughter, people describe it as despair. Despair is too small a word for it. Basically say 135 people are affected by one suicide, and those near the epicenter, it plunges them into a dark, grey, surreal world. Bethy was loved, absolutely loved. And it is so hard. I won't pull any punches. It put me in a terrible place. I'm still not in a brilliant place, but I'm in a better place now. But I was suicidal myself after losing Beth, and it was purely because of losing Bethy.
And Gary, that's a very common thing, I think, isn't it? In terms of the work that you do at PAPYRUS, that the impact of losing somebody to suicide then can create the same suicidal thoughts in the people that have experienced that loss as well. That is such a huge and wide impact.
Very much so. I think there's lots of things that impact people's thoughts of suicide, too many to name probably, but one that we certainly do know is that those bereaved by suicide are more likely to experience the thoughts themselves. I think statistically speaking, more likely to even attempt suicide or even die by suicide themselves. So it's you know, as Mike said, he's got lived experience of this tragically. You know, it's huge. It has a massive impact on those left behind.
And the number of young people that are affected by this and that do sadly take their own lives. What are the figures around that at the moment?
Well, the figures that we're using at the moment, they're actually a little out of date, really. So the figures we use are from 2018. This is across PAPYRUS in the work that we do, the training that we deliver. Part of the reason it's out of date really is because of COVID. It's had a big impact on how suicides are reported. Also, as a UK-wide charity, we get statistics from all the devolved nations as well, and it can take time to collate this all together. But we're looking at, from 2018, 1,866 young people died by suicide. And that's a huge amount of people. I know we've just kind of gone through a pandemic and we've been saturated with numbers, haven't we, every day? But those numbers represent, each one is a life lost. And, you know, the work that we do as PAPYRUS, we support people 35 and under. And that's the figure, 35 and under, 1,866. It's a huge number. It's too many young lives lost by suicide, and it's something that we as a charity strive to want to do something about. We want to reduce that number.
Yeah.
And what are... Oh, hi, Nicola. Thank you very much for joining us.
Hi, can you see? What I've done, I've connected on my mobile phone, and that.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's brilliant. Nicola, we started the broadcast, so thank you so much for joining us. And we were just saying there about the number of young people who, the statistics that Gary was giving us are pretty shocking. And Mike has explained, you know, the impact of the loss of his daughter, Beth. And perhaps we could just ask you to explain, Nicola, what happened to you and Jacob. He was 24, I think, when he took his life, wasn't he? Can you explain what happened there?
Yeah, of course. So Jacob took his life in 2015, October 2015. So we're approaching the 7-year anniversary. I always, whilst I'm approaching this anniversary, I always say I can't really account for the last 7 years. I think when you're so consumed with what's happened and the grief of losing your child, I don't know where 7 years have gone. But you know, Jacob was 24 years old. He was not known to have any mental health issues. If anything, he was quite kind of laid back and, you know, didn't take life serious. He was very sporty, lots of peers, very, very popular. He was very handsome, very fit. So, you know, the profile, he had everything, you know, going for him in life. He still lived at home. I always say he was wrapped in cotton wool and still spoiled rotten. And then after a night out at the Students' Union, he went to a rave, and the following day he was complaining of a hangover, and I believe in an impulsive and spontaneous, you know, kind of situation that he went on to take his life. And it was a huge shock. I mean, the community were completely floored. Because of the profile of Jacob. You know, he was always out running. He'd run the half marathon the week before. Just the type of person he was. He was self-employed. He was just doing really well in life. So it completely shocked everybody. And I think that's when people started to realise the complexities around mental health and what mental health actually looked like, and how quickly somebody can fall into that moment of despair, and with nobody else around, you know, how vulnerable they are. Because we were on holiday at the time, so Jacob was home with his younger brother, who was out that afternoon. So yeah, I think that was the biggest shock for us, how quickly this happened, with, I mean, no warning at all, really. So yeah.
Gary, that's the two situations that Mike and Nicola sadly found themselves in maybe highlight the fact that there is no one cause to this, is there? It's a very complex issue to understand why the individual has done what they've done.
Absolutely. There's no, as far as we're aware, one single factor. You know, I've worked with PAPYRUS for a number of years now, and my primary role is actually working on the helpline, which is called Hopeline UK. So I've had many conversations with people who are experiencing thoughts of suicide, looking for some support from our service to keep safe in those moments. I don't think I've ever spoken to one person who could necessarily name one thing, which was the reason for why they were having those thoughts of suicide and what was going on. It's normally multifaceted and quite complicated as well. I think all these different things impact on each other depending on what's going on for the individual. Often, though, there might be a sense of loss potentially linked to some kind of an event, you know. Any event which gives a sense of loss, I think, and we've all experienced those throughout our lives, and I think young people do as well. That might be a time, perhaps, if we could be extra vigilant as human beings around people that we know. If we know someone that has experienced some kind of sense of loss, maybe that's a question we ask ourselves. Oh, that person's been through something quite difficult, quite substantial. Is that a warning sign? Maybe that's a time that we talk to that person and ask them a bit about what's going on. And if we're concerned, one of the primary things that we say at PAPYRUS is if you're worried about someone, you think they might be suicidal, ask them and use the word suicide, because straight away, if you use that word, it demystifies, it destigmatizes everything. So that person will know that you are an okay person to talk to about that. And if that's how they're feeling, they can talk to you about it, and that can make a big difference.
Mike, you said a little bit earlier that you look back now and you think through what you've been through now, you've maybe missed some signs, and that's through, I believe, some training that you've done with PAPYRUS, who you're raising money for on the Three Dads Walk. But can you sort of explain why you think there were things that maybe you didn't pick up on, or what it was that you didn't think that you picked up on at the time, maybe?
I think Bethy's behaviour had changed over about the last 8 months before she took her life. Her behaviour, she got to remember, she was a performer. She was a singer, Beth. So she was quite theatrical. She was loud. She was always singing, always laughing. But I think her behaviour became a little more erratic. And sometimes it's in the words as well, like I'm having a bad day, I'm not feeling good, you know, I don't want to go out. And if I'd more, this is part of the awareness, isn't it? This is, you know, sort of what we think suicide's never going to happen to us. We'll often don't think suicide's going to ever affect us. But I didn't have the awareness. I always thought I'd be the guy on the train platform who would ask the person who was looking not good, as if we're in a bad place. I thought I'd be that person to ask, how are you? You know, are you all right? But I completely missed Bethy. I completely missed those signs. You know, why aren't you getting out of bed, Beth? Because I'm having a bad day. You know, instead of telling her to come on, don't be silly, come downstairs, I should have asked her, why are you having a bad day? And it's awareness. It's having that awareness. And yeah, people say not to beat myself up about this. You know, it's difficult dealing with young people sometimes and teenagers because they are erratic. They do things out of the norm, but sometimes the signs are there.
We've had a question there from Chloe Taylor, G. So thank you, Chloe, for this. And she's saying what I struggle with is, and you just alluded to it there, Mike, a lot of the narrative around suicide is reaching out and spotting signs. But what if they have spoken about it? What do you do then? Gary, I guess this is something that you have to deal with every day on the calls that you the young people that you're speaking to. What would your advice be around this?
I'm sorry, Jane, I lost you for a moment there.
Oh, that's okay. So we've had a question, which is a lot of the narrative around suicide is about reaching out and spotting signs, which Mike has just sort of said there on reflection. You know, maybe there were some things that he might have been able to react differently to. But what if you have spoken to somebody and you have asked the question, what's the next step then?
Well, I think it's a good question, because suicide in itself is a really difficult thing to talk about. And some people don't talk about it, you know, some people don't mention, or, I mean, how often does it happen when someone just puts their hand up and says exactly how they're feeling, you know, let alone when it comes to thoughts about suicide. And of course, sometimes there might be some signs that we can pick up on, but not always. And if someone hasn't spoken about it, you know, it's difficult, you know, it really, really is hard. But maybe that's where we can break down barriers by asking the question. And, you know, often with context, it really helps, you know, as Mike was saying then, you know, it's horrible to think that were there opportunities missed, and it's a terrible thing to even think about. But I think if we can get this into our kind of daily narrative, all of us, you know, I mean, society, that we just talk about suicide more generally, you know. So if there's anyone we're concerned about, we ask them as a regular thing. And I know it's easier said than done, because there's so much attributed to the word suicide and to suicide itself as a sort of phenomena. But the more we talk about it, the more people have permission to kind of say yes or no, whether they're having those feelings. And something that, obviously, I'm a suicide prevention advisor. So on our helpline, when people make a call to our service, we ask them straight away, anyone that's ringing us, what you're experiencing. But it's also something that you learn to do in your daily life as well. So if there's people, you know, that you're worried about, anyone at all, family, friends, I often speak to people that I know. I'm aware that something's gone on. Are you having thoughts of suicide? No, I'm not. That's not what's going on for me. Or yes, I am. But I guess, you know, over time, it's become normal for me to have these conversations. And the more normalized this is that we talk about this generally, the easier we might have, the more chance we've got of someone speaking up, you know, if they are having telling us.
Yeah, so so I believe you can help people make a self-help plan. Is that right, Gary? So that if somebody has said that has been something that they've contemplated, you can actually put some kind of plan together with them. Is that right? So that they have something to work with.
That's right. Yeah. So anyone that rings Hopeline UK, we structure the conversations in a certain way. The model that we use, so there's a particular suicide prevention model that we use, and that's all the advisors are trained in the same way to follow this model. And what that model does is it's a safe way to have a conversation with someone about suicide. And it goes from the beginning to end of a conversation. It's recognized by the World Health Organization as well. So yeah, when we get onto the idea of helping someone stay safe from their thoughts of suicide, first and foremost, we've got to ask them. Again, we can't assume anything, even though we're a suicide prevention helpline. So we will ask someone, are they having thoughts of suicide? If the answer is yes, we will then go into that conversation of why, what's going on, what's happening for you for suicide to be something you're thinking about. And then perhaps within that conversation, we might hear something from that person, hopefully that suggests perhaps a part of them might want a bit of help to stay safe. And that's the point where we probably introduce the idea of safety, because it is a really important thing then. If someone's having thoughts of suicide, that they can find a way to be safe. Once we're having that conversation with someone and say, yeah, you said something to me here, which makes me think perhaps there's a part of you that wants to have some, you know, conversation about safety around this, or at that point, we'll bring that in. And then we can, yes, make a full comprehensive safety plan with that person, which looks at loads of different things, you know, what's happening, what's going to make thoughts of suicide easier to manage in the moment, what help might they need longer term as well. Loads of different things in that. But I think the important thing with a safety plan is that it comes in at the right time. We need to hear people out when they're having thoughts of suicide. You know, someone's thinking about death and dying. Of course, we care about people. We want people to be safe. But death and dying and safety are the opposite ends of the spectrum. So to help someone, we need to listen to why they're having these thoughts in the first place. And it's at that point that we can perhaps start having those safety conversations then.
And just going back to Chloe, who's put a comment up that unfortunately she was asking because she lost her best friend last year to suicide. And she says here that, you know, she told us how she felt. She was talking about it, but we just didn't have the tools, didn't really know where to go, and that there's a gap there. So Chloe, I'm really sorry that you went through that. But if anybody, you know, if you do come across anybody who is struggling, and certainly for a young adult under the age of 35, then ringing the PAPYRUS Hopeline, then that triggers a process in which the conversation might lead to some kind of support plan that they can then work with. Nicola, perhaps I could come back to you about this impact, because, you know, it's not just the family. You said the whole community, and I'm sure, Mike, this was the same for you as well, but the whole community where you lived in Wales was affected. And you know, I've heard, you know, one incident where a workplace, somebody did take their own life, not in the workplace, but a work colleague, and the company never mentioned it. It was almost, you know, like nobody knew how to talk about it. But people do want to come together, don't they? And how do you address that when a whole community, a whole workplace has been affected by something like this?
Oh, yeah. The whole
Well, Nicola, I think we're just struggling to hear you at the moment.
Hear me now.
There we go. Is that a bit better?
Yeah, okay, I'm nearer.
There we go.
Yeah, so yeah, like I said, the whole community, family and friends were struggling with the death of Jacob. And sadly, 9 months after Jacob took his life, his childhood best friend also went on to take his life. And, you know, and that's when I say that it impacted everybody. And I think he struggled so much, but he thought he wasn't deserving of any support because he was an immediate family. And I think he was always there trying to help others whilst we were all grieving. And, you know, he was struggling so much himself. And I think he thought he had no one to turn to because, like I said, he didn't feel deserving of it. So, yeah, that like really impacted on the community then when two best friends went on to take their lives. And Andrew, that was Jacob's best friend, again, the same profile as Jacob, you know, well loved, well liked in the community, big part of the community, really happy-go-lucky young man. He was full of fun. So again, like it was the whole community were doubly shocked. And that's when we set up kind of the foundation. The community had raised thousands of pounds. And I just thought about setting up a safe space for, you know, young, well, anybody really to come along and to talk about, you know, suicide, or if they've been affected by suicide in any way. And I think that's how, you know, the foundation started then. We started to employ some counsellors, and we did the one-to-one support. And like Gary said, it's about kind of exploring, asking the question. And it always seems it's a question, it's an awkward question, but when you ask people, the relief on their face that you've addressed that, you know, what they're thinking about, because there's such a stigma to it, the relief on their face that you've said the word, and then you can start to explore, like Gary said, what's been happening for them, what is going on for you to have these thoughts and feelings. And then about giving them the support then and the safety plan. We always do a help is at hand safety plan. So we look at, you know, what can keep reach out to at the time. Are you having support from your GP? Have you medical advice, you know, and getting them to come up with you know, like their own coping mechanisms as well to keep themselves safe. And that's what I always kind of think with Jacob that day. He just needed to look at how to keep himself safe at the time, and somebody to ask that question. I always say if I could go back, I would be having different conversations with Jacob, whereas at the time I didn't think I needed those conversations. I'd worked, I was a senior practitioner, I'd worked with young people around suicide and suicide, ideation and thoughts, but I never thought in a million years that I would be impacted on that. I just, never ever. And I think, the biggest lesson for me in all this is that it doesn't discriminate. Suicide, never underestimate it either. It can happen to anybody. That was a big kind of lesson. And if I could go back, I would have a different conversation, and I would be asking openly, asking my children, are you thinking about suicide? And if they're not, but if you are, please, can I be on your safety plan? Can you come to me? Can you talk to me until those feelings pass and we can keep you safe? Definitely different conversations.
Yeah. And Gary, coming back to the sort of the fact that, according, when Papyrus talks and writes about suicide, you say it is preventable, that these plans can work, and that taking your own life does not have to be the end point when you get into that awful black hole that some people do sadly go down into.
I do apologise, Jane. The stream is breaking up for me a little bit. I'm not sure why that is.
So I was just saying there, Gary, can you hear me now?
I can. It's doing that kind of strange robotic thing when it isn't quite working. But
okay.
I think I just about heard what you said about those feeling suicidal. It doesn't have to be the end point, that the safety plans work. Is that what you were asking?
Yes, that suicide is preventable.
Yes. So I hope you can hear me, because everything's frozen on my end, but hopefully you can hear what I'm saying. And yes, here at Papyrus, we believe many young suicides are preventable. And the helpline that we have, people use it, and we get a lot of calls, a lot of conversations with people. Many of those people do tend to get back to us, perhaps letting us know that they've survived their thoughts of suicide, and also perhaps even sometimes that things have moved to a point where suicide is no longer an option for them. Life has improved. Something else that we offer at Hopeline, so when people want to make a safety plan with us, they can do that in a number of ways. And one of the things that we offer is something called HopeLink. And HopeLink is it's like an external website where we create a safety plan with someone, and then they can go away and access that safety plan themselves. And we are seeing data there that once we've created a HopeLink with someone, that the user of that individualized safety plan then goes on to access it a number of times. So we're seeing sort of live data there, not details, because that remains confidential to that person using it, but we do see the fact that that person is going away and utilizing that. And that is very much evidence of that person experiencing thoughts of suicide, but coming up with something that makes a difference for them. And they can then go away and utilize that and focus using that as a way to keep themselves safe. And that's incredible. And that takes a lot of strength from that individual who's having those thoughts and then goes beyond that and keeps themselves safe using that.
And Mike and Nicola, you've obviously both, through the terrible experience that you've been through, have now, you help other people as well, don't you? So Mike, coming back to you first of all, you decided as a result of what had happened that you weren't going to sort of sit down on this, that now, you are very focused on trying to spread the message about prevention and awareness, aren't you? And is that through the training that you've done with Papyrus yourself? Has that helped you?
Oh yeah, the training with Papyrus has been immense for me, and just having the contact with Papyrus as well, all the support and everything there. But yeah, it's about creating a culture of awareness, isn't it? But being able to talk about it, letting people know, or signposting where to go and what to do. Starting Three Dads Walking and everything for me was very much, it gave me point to carry on. But talking to Andy and Tim, it's always, we know these suicides, a lot of them, they are preventable. People deserve a second chance. and to give people those second chances to get them through these often, and all suicides are different. I know there's long-term mental health problems, but to get them through these sometimes temporary dark times and get them to the other side will absolutely, it'll prevent families, things going through this absolutely intolerable heartache. You know, it is about spreading hope. And talking about Hopeline, I mean, what a facility. Absolutely. I mean, people like Gary on the other end, you know, they are, I met a lot of Hopeline. I don't know, what do you call yourself, Gary? Is it an operator or?
An advisor, I think.
So we call ourselves, yeah, Hopeline UK advisors, yeah.
Okay. But they're absolutely wonderful people, absolutely wonderful. But to be able to signpost Hopeline UK, you know, for obviously those who are struggling, but also those concerned others, it's out of this world. It's absolutely brilliant.
And Nicola, the work that you're doing, you're also trying to raise awareness, and this is a particular thing for probably young adults, about that combination of drugs and alcohol, which unfortunately you believe sort of contributed to what happened to Jacob.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm aware that people who are watching this conversation today are, you know, managing young people who've, you know, come into the workplace and got a bit of money and go out partying and enjoying themselves, as do, you know, young students, you know, people just starting out at university. What do you believe are kind of the risks around that, in terms of the research and the work that you're doing?
I think the risks around that is the impulsive behaviour and the spontaneous behaviour in relation to taking alcohol and drugs. You know, 2 days before Jacob died, he wasn't in that place where he was low or he was down. He was invested in the future. He had a driving test on the Monday, you know, so it's very impulsive and a spontaneous act. And sadly, you know, with the bereaved families that we've supported, there are a lot of people coming forward and saying that there is this link between using alcohol and drugs, you know, the night before or 2 nights before, and believing that to be a huge contributing factor to their loved ones' suicide. But going back to talking about, you know, it being preventable, having that right conversation and putting in those that safety plan. To date, we've worked with over 300 people that have come into service, and mainly young men. We are seeing more females now as well. And I think we believe that they've come forward because we're talking openly about suicide. They know we're a suicide intervention and prevention charity. So, you know, what's that saying, that men don't talk about it? They do. You've just got to give people, you know, that opportunity. And, you know, with all 300 people that have come into service, we've had 100% success rate by just having those open conversations and by putting those safety tools in place and strategies. We also do a thing called carer engagement as well. So with the, you know, the permission of that person is involving a family member or a friend within their safety plan and contacting that person as well to raise our concerns and why they've come into service. So it does work. Gary's right, Mike's right, you know, those right conversations and those safety plans, it does work. And it's about giving the people the confidence. So we do a suicide brief intervention training just for community members. It runs for an hour and a half, and it's about giving them those, you know, exploring those basic coping mechanisms with them, and, you know, breaking down the stigma and looking at different language and giving them the confidence to just ask openly. And 100%. I think that, you know, it can, you know, be preventable.
Gary, the work that Nicola and Mike are doing is incredible, and you know, there'll be people on this call today who are managing people in the workforce who maybe, you know, haven't had training to be able to kind of have these conversations. What would be your advice? You know, is there training that they can do? Obviously, we're talking about sort of younger people under the age of 35, which is what your charity deals with. But, this happens to older people too. Is there training they can access? What would you advise somebody who, maybe is concerned about, an employee at work, or a friend or a colleague, a family member? What route should they take?
Again, apologies with the technology. It's difficult to hear entirely everything, but I think in terms of the question, if anyone listening is concerned about someone, whether that's family, friend, whether it's someone in the workplace, feel free to get in touch with Hopeline UK. I mean, as a helpline, we support people 35 and under who are feeling suicidal or concerned about someone else. We also offer advice to professionals, and we don't turn people away either. If someone gets in touch and they're over the age of 35, that's okay. We're still going to support that person. We're still going to give advice to those concerned about someone older as well. So my advice would be that any concerns that you have, or even if you want to just debrief a suicide encounter, because we're aware that a lot of organizations out there might support those who feel suicidal, or might come across a scenario where they have supported or worked with someone who's suicidal and don't have an outlet for that. They don't have a way of debriefing what was said, or what happened, or how they feel about the conversation or the circumstances. So that's a time, I think, as well, to know that Hopeline UK is out there and to get in touch. And it's free phone. We're open every single day of the year. Bank holidays, Christmas Day, you name it, we're there. There's going to be someone there to have a conversation with. You can probably get, rather than read the number out now, if you go on the website, there's all our details there, papyrusuk.org. If you'd rather get in touch, you see web chat, text, email, or the phone, all those avenues for you. And someone will be there to support you and talk you through things.
That's great, Gary. We will share those details at the end of this conversation. So, Mike, you've got a big week coming up, a big month coming up, some tired feet, I should think, already in training. But Mike, as many of you will be aware, is part of the Three Dads Walking team. And Mike, you're starting off in the sort of, you're going around all 4 parliaments, aren't you?
That's correct.
Home nations. Yeah. And what's the aim of your walk and the aim of your campaign this year? Well,
at the end of the last walk, basically, we realised our work wasn't done. It had become an intensely personal mission to us. Andy, Tim and I felt the weight of the grief that young suicide was leaving behind. And we really believe that many of these tragic deaths can be avoided. So the whole point of this walk really is, obviously, we want to carry on with the conversations. We want to talk to people who've been bereaved. We want people to be able to open up and have these open, honest and supportive conversations. It's so important. We also, of course, we want to raise more money for Papyrus. Papyrus exists on donations and goodwill. Of course it does. And as Gary so eloquently has told us all about Hopeline, I mean, Papyrus do a lot more than that. They have so many resources, they really do. But Hopeline is, it's vital we get it out there and can be used. But we also want to get far more on the school's curriculum. And it is a no-brainer for us. We need to equip our young people with life skills. And we're talking about early years, primary school, secondary school, higher education. Spend far more on the PSHE, everything around suicide, age appropriate, of course, age appropriate, but let's teach them. Let our young people come out of education educated on how to look after themselves and others, because that's what it'll be. They'll all be adults, they'll all be parents one day. And if we equip them, and sometimes there's academic qualifications, of course, are important. We've got to get a balance here. I think our young people are under so many different pressures nowadays, coming in from all angles. But to be able to equip them is, surely that's the way. You know, it'll give them second chance. It'll make them far more resilient. What I have noticed as well, that obviously on this walk, we're getting contact with so many wonderful other charities, large and small, foundations, organisations, like Nicola's, like, you know, and Jacob's. Wow, what a job these charities are doing. I mean, just what Nicola's told you there, you know, to do that in Jacob's name is just, yeah, it's absolutely brilliant. But to bring all those charities together somehow, I liken it to all going down a motorway in the same direction. We're all in different cars, aren't we? We can somehow bring all these together. You know, it'll be powerful. It'll be really powerful.
And Nicola, you're going to, I believe, try and meet up with Mike on the walk. Is that right? And again, support that message to the government down there in Wales.
Yes, we're going to meet up with Mike at the Senedd here in South Wales, and bring some of our bereaved families along as well to meet with Mike. Yeah. And something that Mike and Andy and what was the other dad? Tim, that's right. Yeah. Are doing is raising awareness for males accessing and talking about bereavement, because sadly we don't see enough males accessing bereavement support. It's predominantly women, whereas we get males coming into service a lot talking about their suicide thoughts and ideation, but we find a lot of dads don't access bereavement support. My husband was, being one of them, because I think, when Jake died, I remember my husband's friend saying, right, you have to be the strong one now here. You have to hold this family and everything together. So they kind of get it. I think it comes down to kind of that, toxic masculinity, isn't it? And, the data that we've got of, everybody that's accessed the service, sadly, I think we've only seen not even a handful of dads accessing support. So it's really good that these dads are out there and they're there and they're raising the awareness and saying, look, we're grieving, we're grieving too, and it's okay to talk about it and seek support. So I think it's absolutely it's amazing what they're doing.
And Mike, did you find it, out of interest, how hard was it for you to access support then, in terms of what Nicola's saying about other dads being potentially reluctant to sort of admit that they're struggling with this?
Yeah, it is hard. Myself, Andy and Tim are probably quite unusual, as in that when we start talking, you can't shut us up. But that has helped us massively. But as I say, when we walked last year, we were approached by so many bereaved fathers who, they didn't know how to reach out. They didn't know where to get help. And I say, we aren't qualified. We just have that lived experience. But it starts off with talking, then signposting. I mean, the support I got, it started with the GP really, and counselling, also some bereavement support services and things like that. And I went for all of them. I did. The reason why I went for them was because I knew I was suicidal myself. And this is the knock-on effect, as Gary mentioned before. You're far more likely to take your own life. And to lose my little girl like that, it plunged me into a place that's just, out of this world. So, but I would encourage, bereaved fathers to reach out. Absolutely. You can't carry it all on your shoulders. It'll break you. You do need support, and you aren't alone.
Yeah. And the fundraising walk that you're doing is raising money for PAPYRUS, and I believe, Gary, that there's hope that it will help the Hopeline be open 24 hours a day at some stage in the future.
Yes, that's right. At the minute, we are open every day of the year. We're open from 9 a.m. in the morning up until midnight. But of course, we're well aware that the service needs to be extended beyond that. Because we're aware of that, because the people that speak to us tell us that as well. And that's what we want to do. That's something we've always aimed for. We're hoping to get there by the end of the year. But, you know, these things take time. We've got to plan. We've got to get the right people in place. But the will is there. Absolutely it is, from us and for those that need us. And yeah, I think we're going to get there this year. And then that's going to mean that we are always going to be there as a service 24/7 to speak to people that need us. And again, just to reiterate that kind of offering, really, that it's for everyone. It's for those feeling suicidal, but it's for friends and family as well, because there is no textbook for this. There absolutely isn't. And with all the training in the world that I might have had, experience, etc., having these conversations with people that are in your life and that you care about, it's massive, it's huge, and it shouldn't be underestimated. But the more prep you've even got yourselves wanting to have these conversations, you know, Hopeline can help you with that. You know, you can talk to us, we can have conversations, make it easier for you to then go away and ask family members or those that you are concerned about the questions that you need to ask, and we can all hope then for good outcomes. But yeah, anything we can do as a service, we're here, and we really want people to ring. You know, we want to help anyone that needs us.
And a follow-up question from Chloe, who asked one earlier, was just wondering if there's a kind of catalogue of supports that's available to support people with suicidal thoughts, I guess, is what she's saying there. But I mean, there isn't one sort of set of, because I mean, it would probably be several pages long at the moment, wouldn't it? But but Chloe, there is Papyrus, and you can get in touch with Papyrus. We're about to put the details up there, and also that's what you're trying to do, really, Mike and Nicola, isn't it? Try to gather the charities together that work in this space, the foundations, the parents who've set up the trusts in memory of loved ones, and try and, you know, give that you know, more focus so that you all work together, and therefore get that message out to government and the health authorities about the support that is needed. Well, thank you so much for your time today. Mike, we wish you all the best with Tim and Andy on your walk. If you finish up where, Mike?
We'll finish off College Green, Westminster. So yes, yeah. So obviously we'll see Nicola on the way. Are we going to see you, Gary?
I might make an appearance. Why not? Yes, if you finish from the south originally, I'm probably due a visit. So
yeah. We're walking for a month. You know, we're starting on. Well, we start in Edinburgh on the 10th. That's World Suicide Prevention Day. We get to London the 10th of October. That's World Mental Health Day. You know, they're both, you know, very poignant dates. And it is looking forward to it. The wrong word. It's, you know, we're well up for it. Put it that way. We're well up for it.
Good. Well, I hope you've got a steady set of shoes, or you might need a few, actually. You've probably got a whole few sets of them. Listen, Mike, Nicola, Gary, thank you so much for joining us today. Just stay with us for the moment, and we'll just share some more information about how you can follow Mike and Tim and Andy on their walk. So you can find out more about the walk by going to 3dadswalking.uk. You'll see there on their website the details of the route. So if you do want to join them on the walk, they'd be absolutely delighted to meet you. They're, you know, hoping lots of people just join them for a chat on the way. And you can also find out how to support their fundraising walk as well. There's detail there of Jacob's Foundation, the Jacob Abraham Foundation that was set up by Nicola in memory of her son Jacob. There's plenty of details on the website there about the training and the support that they offer too. And of course, there's the website there for Papyrus, as Gary was mentioning earlier. There's plenty more resources and information there. And if you are particularly worried about a young person or a young adult, or indeed you're having difficult thoughts yourself, then please don't hesitate to get in touch with Papyrus's Hopeline UK. You can call them, it's open 9 a.m. to midnight at the moment, but as I say, hopefully going 24 hours a day, and they're also available by text and email as well. There's much more information and video content on suicide prevention and awareness on our own wellbeing platform. So if you're a client, there's plenty more information there. And if you'd like to know more about how we provide preventative online wellbeing support for employees, then please do get in touch, and you can follow us on our social media channels. So it just leaves me to say thanks once again to Mike and Nicola and Gary. Best of luck on the walk. Mike, thank you very much for that supportive message from United to Prevent Suicide, who I know that you've been in touch with in Scotland, Mike. So, you know, we just hope that, you know, the conversations that you have on this journey really lead to some great and impactful action, and that you continue to do the great work that you're doing. Thank you very much, everybody. Really appreciate it today.
Thank you. Bye-bye.